Let's go ahead and get started. So to start off this evening, I'd like to thank our committee sponsors, Lake Plato, Hill and Wilkinson General Contractors, and Pilgrim Building Company. Hopefully we'll be able to do something with our sponsorships soon other than just have them on a slide here. But the idea for tonight is to kind of review the 2030 by the numbers little pamphlet, and then have a brief or however long discussion we want on the 2030 commitment, any challenges y'all are having to either kind of implement strategies or even just to get your firms to sign on, how to either report projects, get kind of a little refresher on the DDX or anything that y'all need, and what we can do to help sign firms on and kind of boost the just general knowledge base of us good folks here in Austin. So I'll go ahead, share my screen again. All right. So can everyone see this, Ashley?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the big AIA website. So there's kind of a couple ways you can get to this report. So if you go to the architect resources and the tools and resources 2030 design data exchange, so that will take you to the sign in, which some are already signed in for the 2030 DDX. And then, so that'll get you signed up or signed in for that, which, so you can sign up for our account before your actual signatory. That's where you'll find data about joining and get kind of started. And then to get to the report, go to the sustainability tab, zero carbon. You'll see there's a couple of buttons here to the right for the 2030 commitment, the A&D materials pledge, and the framework for design excellence, and then scroll down a little bit more. And there's a couple reports that you can download. And here's the 2030 commitment by the numbers. If I click on that, I can download the reports. And so they're always a year behind. So the most recent one, well, I guess 2 years behind since they're using, so the most recent is the 2020 report, and then go all the way back to 2010. You can kind of download any previous reports you want. So, and the reason why it's 2020 is that in this year, 2022, firms will be reporting projects from 2021, and it takes them a little bit of time to sift through all that data. So I believe this was released at the end of last year. Some other, so if you go back to the zero carbon and click on the 2030 commitment, so you can get a link to the design data exchange, blueprint for better, and then there's a bunch of articles for getting everything up for the 2030 commitment and low carbon design. This is the 2020 2030 by the numbers report summary. And if any of you are like me, you'll download this and say, I'm going to read that whenever I have a free moment, and then a free moment never comes. So I figured this was kind of good to get everyone to look at it. So there's kind of this introduction about what all happened in 2020 with COVID-19, the racial justice movement and the political landscape in 2020 to just kind of frame what was happening in this year. And then for everyone who hasn't signed on yet, but in 2020, they renewed the design data exchange tool. So that is much more user-friendly now, a lot easier to use. And then there's a couple summaries. So the overall predicted EUI reduction was 51.3%, which the 2030 challenge 2020 was a 75% reduction. So it's a little bit off of that number. But you can see kind of how many companies reported. 15 companies met that. Oh, in 2020, it jumped up to 80%. Before that, it was 75%. So 15 companies met the 80% reduction target. There were 22,000 projects reported, 102 countries represented. So it's not just in the United States that you can report projects around the world. And then there's these other metrics for reduction of CO2 and the amount of net zero buildings. So there's these graphs looking at the reduction by year. So steadily kind of using more and more. But also with that, you can see the amount of square footage that was reported by year. So we've, in 2020, there's been the most square footage reported, and then also the PUI reduction. And then it gets into a little bit more of kind of strategies. So in this report, they've identified 4 core strategies to move the industry and your firm towards zero carbon, which, so you're not required to model, to do an energy model to report to the DDX, but it's helpful. So the first kind of strategy is to increase energy modeling. Second strategy is building electrification and reducing fossil fuel use on site, or which building electrification can also help with the grid as well. Increasing the amount of renewable energy, whether that is on site or off site. And then they have been making, or I guess the industry as a whole has been making this push for reducing embodied carbon in buildings. And in the DDX, there is now a field where you can report embodied carbon reduction within the buildings. And then it gets into some strategies for how to use those kind of 4 strategies. And that, so with energy modeling, to not think that to meet the 2030 commitment is to use energy modeling as a design tool and not just use it to kind of verify what has been done on the project. And so to not just kind of model at the end of the project, either for code compliance or to get a number to upload to the DDX, and then that you can use modeling to optimize your design. So whether that is through kind of coming up with different site strategies and orientations and getting all the way down to window placement and other kind of more detailed Then so there's some numbers here for the percentage of square footage that either has been modeled. I'm not sure how they got this will be modeled number. Other than maybe someone. So I would just look at the not modeled and the has been modeled and assume that the will be modeled is not modeled right now. But that's the cynic in me. So that there's a whole lot more projects within the DDX that have been modeled, as opposed to in 2018 when it was closer to 50-50. In 2020, about 75 to 23%. There's case studies for reading about. Then, so section 2 is on building and electrification. Which, so now in the DDX, you can list your fuel sources. That's kind of how they're tracking electrification. We can talk about this in the kind of follow-up section if it's necessary, but I assume everyone here kind of understands the benefits of electrification. Now, in the great state of Texas, it might be more of a conversation with clients and a discussion for why it is important and actually get that done. Section 3 for renewable energy. So looking towards the strategy, so you can input renewables in the DDX now, and percentage of kind of if it's on-site or off-site, which I know Austin Energy has a great program. The Green Choice could be considered a REC, a renewable energy certificate that you can start to kind of say is off-site energy or off-site renewable. Let's see a number of projects that were reported, with on-site PV being the majority, and then some solar thermal and on-site wind, with only two projects. And embodied carbon being the last. So as you can see, there was what, 22,000 projects that were reported to the DDX, and 55 of those were reported for embodied carbon. So lagging behind a little bit. Some strategies. So reusing existing adaptive reuse, and that now you can input embodied carbon data within the DDX. And so there is a field in the DDX where you can see what you can put in, whether it's a new construction or major renovation. So that's how they're getting this amount of project, or this count of projects. And if it is a major renovation, actually, if it's interiors only, then they only ask for your lighting power density. If it's a major renovation, you can still fill out all the energy and embodied carbon fields, new construction, but it's the same interface as new construction. Then you can see the embodied carbon modeling tool. So if any of you that are watching are kind of like, oh, that's something that we should be doing, but what tool should we use? You can see build carbon neutral as the most count of projects. that have been reported to the DDX, followed by tally. And then the rest is other and unknown, which isn't super helpful, but there's Athena, one-click, and EC3 as well. And then of those 55 projects that were reported, you can see the embodied carbon ranges. One project that is sequestering carbon, and then a project that is, what, 10 times, a little more than 10 times that. It's the maximum outlier. And there's case studies in there. So that's the 2030 kind of summary for 2020, and then list all the companies that have signed on. And the ones that are underlined are the companies that are meeting the 2020 80% PEUI reduction. That's by firm size. So it's kind of a little summary of what we did in the past year. And so now I'd like to have either a discussion about what would be the most helpful for folks to either get signed on, which thank everyone who filled out the survey and provided answers. Let's see if, so there was one of the kind of barriers to signing on was listed that it would be an added cost. And so signing on to the commitment, there's no charge for that, and access to the DDX, which I'm gonna show the DDX for those of y'all who haven't signed on. As so this is the DDX. So you have your company information, your point of contact when you signed on, and then you can keep your sustainable action plan on here, which there seems to be either my file is too big to load on yet, but I'm kind of troubleshooting that. And then you have your projects that are listed, what type of project that is, the status, and then your EUI and target EUI. And so if you don't model, if you don't have an energy model, the assumptions that are made are based on the energy code that the project is under, and that will give you your baseline EUI as a reduction from the 2003 either commercial CBEC report or the residential building report as well. So that's how you get that baseline EUI target, which if any of you attended the Common App, that's the number that you can put into the predicted EUI and get some action going on the spider chart for the Common App. And then you can also get reports. So it will be based on your reporting year. And so for 2021, we've only inputted 3 projects, which, so there's the March 15th, I believe, is the reporting deadline to submit your portfolio. So there's about a month left for us to get all our projects in here. And so it gives you your percent EUI reduction, the percentage of gross square footage that has been energy modeled, predicted light power density reduction, and then if you put in any of the embodied carbon data, it will also kind of fill that out. So this kind of gives a snapshot of how your firm's kind of doing in terms of percentage of energy modeled and where your kind of target is. And there's no penalty for not reaching the target. It's definitely aspirational, and in terms of kind of getting there, I think you need to start measuring to know how far you need to go and kind of figure out the strategies. So if anyone's saying, oh, we don't have the strategies to be meeting that right now, I would say to go ahead and get signed on and see where your firm is, so that you kind of know, like, oh, maybe we're not that far off. We're at 50 or 60%. We need to kind of increase that by 30%, and really start to dive into kind of where your projects are now and where you need to get going. So that was a long way of saying there's no cost associated, and so all it takes is time. And once you kind of understand the interface, and you have, so the biggest kind of time requirement is probably tracking down all the product data or project data. So as for square footage, and then either if you have an energy model, your energy model information, or your energy code. And once you have that information, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to input per project. You can also do a bulk input, but I haven't tried that yet, so I'm not sure how user-friendly that is. But with that, I'll turn it over for questions or discussion if anyone wants to talk other than me.
Josh, is there a, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say you can also put questions in the chat if you'd like, and we'll kind of monitor that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kendall.
Since my firm, there's a person in our firm who does it for everyone, so I don't interact with it personally, or haven't in a couple years. Is there an embodied carbon calculator in there, or you have to input data from another tool like Tally?
So you'd have to input data from another tool like Tally.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty much the only thing that the DDX will provide you is the baseline EUI, and then the zero tool. So what is the kind of 80% reduction, which I believe the baseline is going to be based on that 2003 kind of building survey by the Department of Energy. So that's how you get that baseline EUI. And then the target EUI is based on the 80% reduction number, which in 2005 will jump up to 85% or 90%.
Hi, Josh, it's Bonnie. Do you rely a lot on your MEP engineer to upload data? Because a lot of it is mechanically driven data.
So you can invite collaborators through the DDX. So I guess in terms of kind of getting into specifics on like if you need to input HVAC loads or anything, it doesn't get that specific. It's based on your predicted EUI, so your energy use intensity, and that's pretty much the only number that is necessary for the kind of energy portion of it. And then you can definitely kind of get more detailed into renewables, with the kind of square footage, with the offset you're getting, as well as, so for the lighting power density, that's something that typically your engineer, your electrical engineer would be able to give you quicker than you could figure out. But in terms of kind of energy modeling, it kind of depends on who's doing that and where you
Right.
get that information from. Same with the embodied carbon.
Right. Okay.
Bonnie, this is Tom Gibbons. For whatever it's worth, having done this a little bit, I'm lucky to not have to upload it anymore, but we still have to chase down a lot of answers. We usually find that it's easier for us, as architects, whoever the signatory is, who's ever really managing the uploads, to do the uploads. But we try to get that information from the team, but we usually don't like give them access and have them do the uploads, if that makes sense. So
It does.
usually the EUIs, it's not that hard to calculate. If you get the lead summary sheet, I mean, if they've done a lead project, there's a lead summary sheet. We also will sort of ask if it's not a lead project or AGB, we'll ask them for the energy model results, but like packaged in like the lead format where it gives you the overall kilowatt hours. It's not too much number crunching as long as we have the square footage that they used for the energy model, and then we'll run that EUI out and just kind of enter that. We usually don't ask the engineers to sort of get into DDX and get into the tool. We'll usually just say, hey, what's the EUI, or give me the summary sheet from the energy model, or what's the LPD, and kind of go from there for whatever
Okay,
that's worth.
that makes sense. And easier. That makes it easier.
Yeah. I've
You
learned
don't have to
from
send-
managing many lead projects. Sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen is bad.
Yes,
So just give
yes,
me
it
the
is.
information, and then I will sort of crunch it as need be. And if I'm wrong, at least I'm consistently wrong because I'm crunching the numbers every time. But anyway.
Right.
Josh, this is Rich McMath. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So the Austin Energy total energy supply portfolio is what, 40 to 50% renewables, I think, somewhere in that range. Therefore, if a project's in the Austin Energy grid, you can enter offsite energy is 40 to 50% right off the bat, right?
You could, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a specifically identified community solar project. It's just your utility provides X% renewable right off the grid.
And I think if you kind of take that to its conclusion on like what are we actually reporting is, and how it kind of relates to those like 4 key strategies, and that if you can electrify your projects, that as the Austin Energy grid becomes greener, that your projects will perform better.
And I can take that percentage. I mean, right off, it's probably right available right now. It's 50%, I'm thinking. It doesn't negate the potential for on-site at all or anything, but if it's there, it's usable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi everyone. With the Chrysler regard, my first year professor of architecture had not recommended the LEED certification test for aspiring architects. How important is LEED certification to meeting the 2030 COTE commitment?
So I think along with kind of anything that the AIA is putting out, along with the framework for design excellence and the 2030 commitment, there's no prerequisite for certification for whether that's LEED, living building, passive house, or any of that. I think if you do have a project that is pursuing that, some of this data is going to be easier to come by, and that you're required to have an energy model for those certifications. And so you'll have your EUI readily available. Whereas for projects that don't have that, you're going to rely a little bit more on the default code equivalency.
Can I say something? Catherine, you said that a professor recommended or didn't recommend.
A professor had asked that the students not take the lead exam. It was very disconcerting.
Yeah, why? Yeah, I'm wondering why, what their reasoning was.
Kendall, this sounds like an extremely
It's
cynical.
Beer Mueller architects firm.
Who?
Beer Mueller.
Mm,
Yeah, I don't know them. I've never heard that. That's interesting.
Catherine, I know them. That's Veer Mueller is he went to University of Virginia, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, you tell him to call me.
yeah.
What's his name again? His name's escaping me. He practices in India. He's hired like multiple people who went to UVA, which is where I went for architecture school. So yeah, you tell him to call me and we'll have a talk. So
Catherine, I don't
worry.
think anyone on this call would agree with your professor. And I think, you know, students ask me this a lot, and I always recommend it because it is a baseline amount of knowledge that you need in order to be able to design sustainably, whether or not you are working on a LEED project. I got LEED certified and I didn't work on a LEED project for probably 8 years, but the knowledge is what built my interest and my personal, you know, building my own knowledge and interests. It was the foundation for that. So Catherine, I would highly recommend you pursue LEED certification.
I agree, Kendall. I actually author several LEED Green Associate classes, have done it through the pandemic for our office, because to me, aspiring professionals need to gather as much information as they can. Learning about sustainable design opens your world so much for any design. And like you said, Kendall, whether it's a LEED project or not, you know, some of the best projects I've done were never LEED or WELL or living building standard. But yet the people, the owners, were very concerned about teaching the people that are using the building that it is a sustainable building. So we did a lot of things in order to make that work. It opens your mind a lot. So yes, please do. Please look into certification. I was actually certified in 2005. And at the time, it was something new. I don't think it was very old then, being a LEED AP. And of course, I'd never done a LEED project, but since then I've done many LEED projects, and it's amazing how much you learn on every single one of them, whether it's that or Austin Energy Green Building or whatever platform we're looking at. It's really helpful to being an architect overall.
And I guess to bring that all around, well, I should say it's Pankaj Vergupta. So any hate mail can go over to Pankaj if anyone wants to send that ahead. But I guess bringing that all back around as well, I would say that, you know, getting an understanding of how energy modeling works to some extent, which you will through that exam, and also now with LEED version 4, having embodied carbon as part of it as well, and some of the materials and resources credits. And it'll at least sort of give you an idea of what that means and some of the better things to do, and sort of get your feet wet in those areas, which contribute back, Josh, to sort of what we're entering into the DDX and tracking with 2030.
Yeah, and I guess part of kind of I think in Austin, there's what, 20 firms that are signed on to the 2030 commitment. So part of this conversation is just like, what is the lowest barrier of entry to get people to sign on, which for the folks here who definitely care about sustainability and about high performing projects, I think that is not an issue. I think for the kind of greater community, it might be like, okay, how do we get them to sign on? How do we kind of say, hey, this isn't that much work, there's no cost associated with it, and it can benefit your portfolio.
My own experience is I've been confronted with the idea that maybe faith and security are also key issues that no one seems to be discussing toward the built environment as well, besides sustainability. No one seems to be emphasizing how important that is.
I think there's a lot of, to unpack there. But I think that there's a lot of conversations starting to happen. I mean, I agree with you. I think the first wave of sustainability, if you could call it that, was very focused on the sort of tangible things that we could measure and test and create metrics around. And as these programs have developed, they've come to incorporate more intangible, at least intention. So with Living Building Challenge, the just company labels, ESG reports, we have the Well Building Standard and the Living Building Challenge, certain petals focused more on equity and health, and health includes safety, and a sort of total health, like physical, mental, emotional, and social health. So I think that conversation is starting. It is a little bit farther behind, but there are a lot of resources out there, and people starting to sort of try to understand what it means from a data-driven design perspective, just so we can have something to measure. I think Josh made a really good point earlier that with any of these standards, you don't really know where you are until you start to measure it. So just taking that first step and getting the information out there and then kind of learning from that information is really important. So that's the biggest goal, I think, of the AIA 2030 commitment, that getting into that practice of being transparent and having that moment of reflection every year on how your projects are doing. And in the case of the 2030 commitment, it's having that moment of reflection mostly related to energy and carbon performance metrics, but certainly that is a model, right, for the more comfortable we get with that, the more other things we can start to measure and understand and track and improve upon. So I'm not trying to suggest that there's like an order of importance, but I think we're just kind of recognizing the order in which these things have kind of unfolded in the industry.
And I think to kind of piggyback off that, if your firm is just kind of starting on this journey and it's either like, oh, what's the tool we can use that is going to provide this, or what's the interest that someone or multiple people at the firm have, so that they can at least get that started, find out kind of how the firm is actually doing, and then implement that. And it's not about kind of like doing, like meeting the commitment right away. Like I doubt any place that is going to sign on to the 2030 commitment this year is going to meet that 80% reduction. So it's about taking that first step, making incremental change. Like if your firm joins on today in 2022, you have 8 years to meet that commitment. And even if don't meet the commitment in 8 years, like I think it's about making progress towards it. And like on January 1st, 2031, if you're not meeting the 2030 commitment, it's not like all the work that you've done in the past 8 years isn't worth anything. So it's about making that step and putting your best foot forward.
Josh, I had a question. I don't want to put us too far off track. I mean, I know we have sort of the DDX and uploading, operational energy use and possibly some embodied, but there is a sustainability action plan component. Is that still part of it? I don't know if y'all have covered that elsewhere. I think I missed a call or two here and there, but if I recall, that is part of kind of the sign up and declaration, is it not?
Yeah, so within 3 months, well, 3 to 6 months, depending on what pamphlet you find from the AIA, you're supposed to upload a sustainability action plan. Last year in February and March, I believe, we had webinars with couple of people from around the country on how to set up a sustainability action plan. There's a lot of good resources on the 2030 kind of help page on how to do the 2030 action plan. Just off the kind of top of my head, I can see kind of 3 different ways that you can go about creating that. And it's either if someone has an interest that they just create it based on what they know about the firm and then get buy-in from firm leadership and from kind of your coworkers and start to implement that. Another way is to kind of do it through surveys, kind of get crowdsource that information to kind of create that sustainability action plan and put it into action. And then, so those are kind of 2 kind of opposing ways where it's either one person taking the lead or, well, it's still going to be one person probably taking the lead, and then it's either just making that their own thing, making it with the group. And then if your firm has a little bit more of a hierarchy within it, you could definitely kind of create that with the firm leadership, make sure they have buy-in from day one, and then go about crafting that sustainability action plan. And it should reflect your firm culture and interest within the firm.
In terms
I just
of,
dropped a link in the chat to find the recording from those sessions on our website too. Go ahead, Laura, sorry.
In terms of firm buy-in, one of the things that I keep on hearing, trying to get my firm to sign on is, and without disclosing everybody's fee structures, how do we pay for the extra man hours of having to log everything? And with Austin Green Energy, a lot of it's already kind of taken care of and is a prerequisite for a lot of buildings. But taking that next step and going above and beyond, what were the main selling points that really stuck that for y'all's firms, or how have y'all found clients reacting to the sign on? Is it something that a client requests that their project is tracked, or is it something that is kind of an initiative of the firm to kind of determine which project gets tracked and which one doesn't?
So at least in my experience, it's definitely been more of kind of led by the firm and kind of firm culture, and a little less on kind of being client driven. I guess in terms of kind of where the fee kind of comes from to report, I mean, it takes 10 to 15 minutes to report a project. So I think that everyone probably has that within their project budget, within their overhead budget. I don't find the kind of, where does this come from? Like, where does the money come to pay for this? To be an argument that has any legs. I think if it comes to energy modeling, that's definitely kind of a conversation that can happen. I think in just reporting projects to the DDX, I don't think there's any kind of reason why you can't sign on to the DDX, even if all your projects are just code compliant, kind of code equivalent projects. Like that can be a perfectly fine first step. I think after that, you start to kind of see like, okay, well, we're at right now, IEC 2021 has a 52% reduction. So if all your projects are just being reported by code within the city of Austin following code, you're gonna have a 52% reduction to your portfolio based on the 2030 data. I think after you see that, then it becomes, okay, how do we start to do better? And I think that can be, that starts to be a little bit more client driven, clients that have their own key performance indicators of sustainability, that want to have more energy efficient buildings, high performing buildings, net zero buildings. And if you get clients like that, then it's definitely, okay, we're part of the 2030 commitment. This is the reduction that the AIA is targeting. I believe that's reachable because there's all these other firms that are doing this. And that is one thing that I didn't show from the DDX is you can break out projects based on climate zone and type and see the average the average reduction based on those. So and I believe architecture is a competitive practice, that if you see those numbers and like, oh, we can be at least average, then you'll start to kind of set your own baselines in that way and be like, okay, well, if a client comes and say, I want a project that performs better, then you can have some data to back that up, to say that you are designing a project that is this percent better than other projects in the region.
Laura, what types of projects do you work on?
We're working on all sorts, multifamily, office, kind of larger development as well. So a good range, and a lot of our projects are with, we're already doing all of the energy modeling and Austin Green Building as well. But that explanation of even like the 10 to 15 minutes really helps in terms of like how much time commitment this is actually, taking on. Because when you say it in the grand scheme of that, I mean, that's no time in terms of the resources and the amount of information that you can get and the knowledge that's to be gained, so that's helpful.
And so you can kind of report at each design milestone, or you can just kind of report like at the end of schematic design and the end of construction. It's kind of like that level of effort is kind of up to whoever's doing it. But I think like it took me maybe 30 minutes to kind of understand the interface. And then after that, like as long as I have square footage and energy model data, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to input, to update. So it's like once you're doing your timesheet, go ahead and put in your data too.
And I think we have a good representation of firm size too. So any questions? I mean, I feel like Josh probably smaller firm, Ashley probably mid-sized, myself bigger, and I guess Kendall. I don't know, Kendall, are you guys massive, or I don't know what your number is, but even, I mean, if you are the only person in a big firm who is pushing this, I will say the other, XXL. I will say the other side of it is, it will be hard if it is just you, Laura, putting this stuff into DDX, if you have a very large firm. But if it's medium sized, and the other thing, we start with email, like we break out the projects from our like accounting software or something. I don't know. I don't even mess with that. But an email comes to me that says, Tom, here are your 20 projects. Go find all the information. And I start with the project managers and I email them. And I've actually been completely surprised that they even email me back, but they do. And they'll say, here's where the energy model is, or, and then some of them we don't know. So I just dig into the folder structure and kind of pick some of this stuff out. But yeah, Josh, it doesn't take all that long. Our boat is a little bit bigger. So I bill on overhead like crazy because I don't give a shit. And the higher ups hate it at my firm. But like, I'm convinced that really good firms invest in themselves, and architecture is a contact sport when it comes to climate. And the number one thing we need to do as architects is become climate evangelists and push back against clients and our bosses and everyone who gets in our way. So I do that by just billing whatever I want, whenever I want. And if I want to put some time in and record DDX, I do. That's kind of the view from the larger firm for whatever it's worth. But so I guess, Laura, that's to say, if it's sort of just you, you might want to get some friends. But if it's a smaller operation, I think it is not that hard to sort of get this going after you've greased the wheels and put in your sustainability action plan. It's not all that challenging, I'd say, after that. And if you are larger and have a lot of projects, you can sort of easily pull some other folks in to get that data. And once it's kind of in your own spreadsheet, yeah, there is some mass upload you can do, but it's once it's in there, it's easy. Just here's the EUI, or we don't have the EUI. It was ASHRAE 2013, square footage, location, done type stuff.
Laura, one reason we added that requirement to our design awards is because for incentivization. So you could tell your firm, you want to get a design award? Well, let's do AIA 2030.
That's right. Good idea.
They're all super helpful responses. Thanks so much.
And really, Laura, this is Bonnie. If the design, all of this is so much easier. The sustainability portion is so much easier. If you start from the beginning during design, talk with the client, talk with your engineers, talk with everyone in the team, and everything falls into place, and then it's done. I mean, it's there. It's amazing how easy it is when you have a team that collaborates from the beginning, whether it's a lead project or Austrian Energy Green Building or whatever you need. You don't have to start digging for information. And I know that's a big task to get people to start from the beginning to do that, but that's the way we should design.
I think with that, we're just about at time. If anyone has any closing thoughts, and then we'll give a few announcements. Hearing none. Thanks all for joining us. This was our COTE Committee on the Environment February meeting. We'll be focusing our monthly meetings alternatively on AIA 2030 commitment, health and well-being, and environmental justice throughout the remainder of this year. So next month will be the health and wellness topic, followed by environmental justice, and then we'll kind of come back to 2030 again. So we hope you'll join us for any and all of those. First Thursday of the month, 5:30. I was going to say right here, but hopefully not right here, hopefully in person sometime soon. Also please connect with us on social media if you haven't already, and sign up for our listserv via our website. We send out information about other events that we're organizing besides our monthly meetings. So coming up, we actually have a part 2 of a training on the Common app, which will be required content to fill out to submit to design awards for this year, Design Excellence Awards for AIA Austin. And I believe it's also required for the Texas State Awards as well. Kendall and Bonnie have been championing that effort. If you all have anything you want to add, that's going to be happening on February 22nd, I believe, during lunch.
And then also want to plug in that we're having in light of it being the month of relationships, the month of love, we are having a speed dating, or really speed networking event next week on February 9th. We're trying to build a sustainability champions network. So we're trying to get representation at every firm in the city to push and advance us forward as a collective AEC industry in Austin. So those of you, Laura and Catherine, representing different companies, we'd love to have you join that. And it doesn't matter how much or how little you know, we're just trying to build networking and mentorship opportunities for everyone.
And Kendall, that is also available on the webs or on the calendar to register for that. So let me drop that link in the chat as well.
Yes.
These are all on Zoom, right?
Yes.
For
Those two events are
Yes.
virtual at the
the
moment.
near future only, hopefully.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with us and for contributing to a great discussion. Thanks to Josh for being our fearless leader on AIA 2030 and for all of you for your participation.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Anything,
Josh.
just sign up your company and don't ask them about it.
Ask forgiveness, not permission, right? Stay warm, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks.
Great